Ferrari were looking for damage on the right-hand side of the car, which was all quite obvious. And as we saw from the FIA documents, they changed the front and the rear right-hand side suspension and lots of other bits and pieces as well. I think the issue that happened there is I think they were kind of blindsided. They were looking at the right side of the car, but now when we look back, we can actually see that Charles actually contacted with the left-hand side rear wheel the barrier on the entry to the swimming pool, and I think that has caused some of the problem. Then obviously as he had the accident itself, and I presume that initial contact led to the hitting of the apex with the left side of the car, jumped over the barriers. Obviously the car landed quite heavily, so Ferrari had been focused completely on one side of the car and didn't look really at the other drive shaft and the other side of the car. And what has happened, and Ferrari, initially, some of the first reports that I was getting from Ferrari and from people that I know in the sport were contradicting themselves. I think Ferrari have kind of changed their position now and said, yes, it is all part of the same accident, the damage. And what has happened, it is the drive shaft, and it's not the drive shaft itself that was the problem, but with the impact passing through from one drive shaft through the differential into the other one, what you've had is there's a small pin inside the differential. So the drive shaft, you obviously, we all kind of understand what they are. They're these kind of orangey copper coloured tubes at the back of the car made from titanium. You have the tripod CV joints. One of them goes into the differential, and there's a little hole to cope with the tripod inside the differential. That then holds the grease, and then there's a plastic cover, a rubber cover that goes over that to keep the grease inside. So it's very much like our road cars with white grease inside. But what had happened is there's a small locating pin that just keeps the drive shaft in exactly the right position as it's spinning around. And with the impact, that pin has actually driven back through the hub inside the differential and has caused the problem. So then when Charles went out to do his reconnaissance laps before the race, all the grease obviously melts very quickly and has then gone into the gearbox, and effectively there's no grease on that CV joint. It wouldn't last the race. I don't think the gearbox would last the race with loads of white grease inside with the gearbox oil, and it meant he had a did not start, which is obviously very unusual these days. And really, when it comes to Ferrari, you have to really look at them and go, well, you had a big accident here. There's lots of different mechanisms of the accident that caused the problems. Why didn't you take the other drive shaft out, look at it, inspect the diff hub and see if there was a problem inside there, which clearly there was? They chose not to. And again, there's lots of sort of comments coming out that the mechanics wanted to, but the management didn't. Again, this is all kind of conjecture, and Ferrari have said that they will change their processes going forwards. But when you hear something like that from someone like Ferrari that have been in Formula One for so many races, surely their working practices must be able to cope with that. So I think this really is very much an own goal by Ferrari over Saturday night into Sunday, and obviously Sunday morning. And it's a DNF that could have been, or did not start, that could have been avoided. Well, there is the Parc Fermé regulations, and this is why Ferrari didn't change everything. So there's a set of rules in place that says you're not allowed to change parts unless they've been damaged. You can't change parts as a precaution, and you've got the evening cut-off in which to finish your work. And then from, I think it might vary at Monaco, but sort of about 9 o'clock in the morning, they can go back and have another look at the car. So there's this overnight where they can't be working. However, each team has a number of jokers, and they're allowed to work late one night if there is, extenuating circumstances, which clearly there was here, where there was a big accident and they've got pole position and it's Monaco. So they had some pressure and they had some regulations which to meet, but looking at the bigger picture of the things, there's no reason why Ferrari couldn't have done all of this work in the time allowed, even if they did have their overnight joker. They can remove as much of the car as they want under FIA scrutineer's observation. As long as they put it back together with the original parts, there's no penalty involved. And most of the cars are stripped down to nearly nothing every night before a race as standard in which to do this. Maybe they might not take the drive shaft and the suspension off the car. That wouldn't necessarily be a normal part of the process, but Ferrari were free to do that. And while it wasn't the drive shaft itself, it was actually the gearbox, that would have had a much smaller penalty by swapping the gearbox than a DNF. And it was very much the gearbox that failed, albeit caused by the drive shaft. The drive shaft was perfectly raceable, but the diff hub, which is part of the gearbox, was the part that was actually damaged. Well, the job they would have had to have done is take the rear suspension off, which comes off as a complete assembly, including the upright, including the drive shaft, and had a look inside the diff hub, and obviously then inspect the drive shaft there as well. So it's not a big job. It's not that they have to take the gearbox out of the rear carrier and dismantle it. It's very much a case of actually the damage was externally visible once you'd removed the drive shaft and the CV joint from the diff hub. They did that on the other side, yes, and obviously because the complete side there, but they didn't look at the knock-on effect onto the other side of the car. Not necessarily. I mean, they don't come as a matched pair, and you can mix and match sides of the rear suspension without a problem. And even if they couldn't prove to the FIA scrutineers that there was damage on those parts, then they're not free to swap them anyway. Yeah, you can. If you look at the side profile of the tyre actually bulges by well over an inch from the wheel, sort of tucked slightly inside, so that the balloon shape of the tyre normally will protect and dampen any impact with the barriers. I've seen a couple of stills from the TV footage that suggested that it was sparks coming from the rear wheel from that initial impact with the outside barrier. So that would then suggest that he actually hit that with more than a kiss, but much more of a bump. And it also explains for those conspiracy theorists why he put so much lock on going towards the apex, because he was expecting the car to be turning that way from the impact, so he's overcorrected, and that's why he actually hit the inner guardrail so hard and so early, because of that correction. So again, you can see this all kind of stacking up, and it certainly debunks all the conspiracy theories that were going around on Saturday night.